All right, here with reaction to tonight's news opening monologue, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton and former Deputy Assistant to the President, Fox News National Security Strategist Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, there's so much to unravel here on so many different levels. And what we're really beginning to see is that more and more there's evidence that this goes back to the Obama administration. And even the president knew. The Susan Rice memo to self is very revealing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so transparent. It simply talks to, the ability or the inability to be subtle about a cover-up when you're no longer the national security advisor. Let me just make one comment. I was listening to your monologue, and something occurred to me listening to the last segment. Robert Mueller was empowered to do what? To investigate whether there was collusion, whatever that is, between the Trump campaign and Russia. The Rod Rosenstein press conference last week started with what statement, Sean? There is no evidence that despite what Russia did, there was any effect on the election. That's how he started. So what are we talking about? Why are we spending millions of dollars? The Kremlin are bad guys. Vladimir Putin, the former KGB officer, I get it. But if you start with the assertion nothing happened that changed the election, then why don't you dissolve the whole office of the special counsel?
Look, that should have happened a long time ago, and he should never have been allowed to put this abusively biased team together. Tom, let me read you something. This is from the DOJ's announcement from last Friday when they actually went out and said, when they said the indictment includes 8 criminal counts and criminal conspiracy to defraud the U.S. The defendants allegedly conspired to defraud the U.S. by impairing the lawful functions of the FEC, the U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Department of State, in administrating federal requirements of disclosure for foreign involvement in certain domestic activities. I want to ask this in relation to Russia's point, which I thought was brilliant, which was, wait a minute, if they would have done it in this particular case, that means Hillary, that means Fusion, that means Christopher Steele, that means everyone else would have, the same standards would have applied. So while they talk broadly about it in the indictment and they mention it in their press release, that's not what they were charged with. Do you see that that was done purposely?
Yeah, I think it was a fundamentally dishonest document designed to distract from the fact that the Russia collusion allegations against Donald Trump are collapsing, and the reason for being of the Mueller investigation is disappearing. And you've got, in many ways, the Obama administration reacted appropriately to what the Russians were doing, as alleged in this indictment, because they were having an immaterial impact on our public policy process. They should have been told to stop messing around, which evidently they were. But they weren't spending a lot of money, and they were having zero impact. But on the other hand, they were also messing around significantly by trying to destroy Donald Trump through this dossier leaking through Russian intelligence services to the Clinton campaign that laundered it into the Obama DOJ and FBI. And rather than respond appropriately and protect Mr. Trump from this smear effort by the Russians, they used it as a pretext to target and spy on him and his team. That is where, that's the scandal, and the fundamentals of that scandal haven't changed with this press release / indictment last Friday. That's going to go nowhere.
But yeah, that was a political document to be that indictment, because they know they're not going to arrest any of these people. But your point is well taken. There is Russian interference. There was. And Hillary Clinton's campaign in the DNC brought the Russians in, Dr. Gorka. They paid the Russians to be involved in this, short of the trolls, apart from the trolls. And why wouldn't the Russians think they can get away with it? After all, Vladimir Putin put his operatives in America, and they got 20% of our uranium. Why would they think anything else?
Look, there are categories from the Cold War, the useful idiot category. Michael Moore was a useful idiot when he shows up at that demonstration against Donald Trump that's been organized by the Russians. But we're not talking about useful idiots when it comes to the FISA court surveillance and the Steele dossier. Here, let's use a phrase from the military. Hillary Clinton, her lawyers and the DNC were force multipliers for Russian propaganda that attacked a presidential candidate during an election. They weren't unwitting. They actually paid for it. more than $12 million of Russian propaganda paid for and funneled into an illegal surveillance warrant against a U.S. citizen.
I got to roll. You guys have been doing amazing work. Keep up the good work. We need your voice every night.